even for the American who absolutely loves everything about the United States and says there's so many great places to visit and live here in the United States, even that group thinks, wait a minute, it would be really cool, like really fun to go live abroad for a year. Go to Portugal. I think one of the most popular articles for a month straight around the holidays was about a woman who moved to a little coastal town in Mexico. And it's every time I read one of these, I think it's such an amazing, it's like the Anthony Bourdain life, no reservations, parts unknown. Edd and Cynthia, what made you guys think, hey, maybe it'd be fun to go overseas? And by the way, where are you guys in Ecuador right now? Or are you back in the United States? Where are you?
No.
We are sitting in my office in Ecuador, actually, in Cuenca.
Cuenca, Ecuador, yeah.
What's the name of it again?
Cuenca, Cuenca.
And how is your Spanish?
It is functional.
Yeah.
Functional. Okay.
It will never be fluent.
It's we like to say, Wes, that we can navigate the whole food scene and we can always get home. So
you always get home and order what you would like and find the servicios, right? Or wait, no, that's beer. What's the bathrooms? Donde los servicios or baños, right? Sí. I just remember being in Spain. I think that was like the first thing I learned is where are the bathrooms?
The last thing too.
All right, so you're living this. You're preparing for retirement, and you're all of a sudden you start thinking maybe we can go somewhere outside the United States. What did that take us through that journey? How old were you guys when you started thinking about this? And maybe let's go maybe 5 years pre-retirement, or maybe whatever's appropriate, 10 years. Tell me about how you guys were prepping for retirement here on the Retire Sooner podcast. And then what led you to sort of think, maybe it'd be fun to go to another country for a while. And so take me through that journey.
Okay.
Well, if it were really that much of a Pollyanna journey, it would be much more, that would be a different version, but that's not actually the way it happened.
Well, let's hear the unvarnished truth.
Okay.
We were in our prime earning years in Las Vegas with what we thought was a solid retirement plan in place. Unfortunately, a lot of it involved real estate, and then 2008 happened. So we went from the peak of our careers and a solid portfolio, blah, 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 to our careers disappearing, our house losing 2/3 of its value, and our investments and savings plummeting by the day as well. So it wasn't like we were sitting around thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be fun? We were in a desperate financial situation at that time. And we spent months, we came to the realization we were not going to be able to recover at our age. And the employment situation was such that we weren't going to be able to get to the income level that we had enjoyed for years. So we had to formulate a plan B.
And we did.
And you did.
We did. So, and just, to add to what Ed said, we had thought one of these days when we retire, we would love to travel, see, maybe even live in different parts of the world. But that was somewhere in the future. And what happened in 2008, 2009, just made all of that happen much quicker than we were prepared for, really.
By the way, guys, what industry were y'all in?
Well, I was in the financial service industry specifically for automobiles, and nobody was buying cars.
And I was in new construction real estate, luxury real estate, working on a project that was just coming out of the ground at Lake Las Vegas, and I was working for Sotheby's International Realty. Well, the project just came to a halt, my job came to a halt. And,
And luxury real estate came to a halt for a
Yeah.
long time.
yeah.
And
So,
Vegas was the hardest hit of just about any place in the whole country.
Right, right. Okay, so because my natural inclination is to think, okay, why not just work, just extend working, right? Why not just say, oh, we're going to work another 5 to 7 years. We hadn't planned on it, but we're going to do that. We're going to try to make this up. But for you guys, and like so many Americans during the great financial crisis, because it was so broad, there was such a broad sell-off. There was such a hit to real estate prices, really like we'd almost never seen. And then every industry around that was crushed. You guys were kind of looking around thinking, wait a minute, there really are no other great options here.
That's
So it's
pretty much
not,
it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
our plan B was, I told Cynthia, we need to find some place to live with a lower cost of living.
and I said, okay, that sounds great.
And then I said, I'm talking about moving out of the country. And she said,
What? we're gonna do what?
but it was just kind of I was a year away when we moved here from taking early Social Security at 62. Cynthia was in her late 50s.
Late 50s.
So she was not even close to that.
Mhm.
So we our moving abroad idea was not so much of which of these great options are we going to choose from. We felt like it was the best and almost only option we had to be able to
Just survive. Really.
survive and have a chance to not just kiss all of our dreams goodbye that we had worked for our whole life, basically.
So how did you end up picking Ecuador, and what were some of the other places that you considered? Right? It sounds like you were looking at this from a cost perspective. So where were you looking?
Well, that's where Cynthia comes in. She said,
Well, I said, okay, Ed, I'm on board with this, but we cannot just uproot our whole life and move to another country solely based on the cost of living. It has to, this place has to be a place that we really want to make a new life. So there are more factors involved than just the money. And that's when we sat down and we made our wish list of if we could pick the ideal location, what would that look like? What do we actually want?
So that's where you guys go through this checklist of, hey, we've got to look at cost of living. We got to look at the climate. We've got to look at healthcare. We got to look at real estate there, living. And then do we buy, do we rent? So take us maybe through that a little bit in the early days as you were looking at different places. What else was on the radar besides Ecuador?
well, the early days is a good way to put it because we're so used to on the internet everything being at our fingertips now. And in 2008, 2009, that information just wasn't out there like it is now. We happened to find one blogger here in Cuenca that we communicated with, but it was slim pickings. So based on our personal wish list, which involved the things that you said, cost of living, healthcare. We were in good health, but we weren't getting any younger, so we didn't want to go to a place with poor health care. Climate was huge for us. Proximity to the States because we wanted to be able to visit. We didn't have grandchildren at that time, but we hoped that we would, and we in fact now do. So we didn't want to be way away from them. The size of the city, there was a lot of factors for us. So the climate thing was a big driver, and that ruled out for us quickly places that are very popular expat destinations like Costa Rica and Panama, because for us they're too hot and humid.
It's tropical.
We lived in Atlanta most of our lives. We're in the South. Then we lived in Vegas, so we knew wet heat and dry heat, and we didn't want either one of them too much anymore. Yeah. And we never were that fan.
By the way, for those listening, Atlanta's the wet heat, of course. Vegas is the dry heat, right?
Yeah. And just side note, we spent most of our life in Atlanta, so we are very familiar with that kind of climate.
By the way, we're in remember the pollen season where everything gets yellow? It's so much pollen, your car is coated. Yeah, we're in that season right now. Only lasts for about a week. It's only one rough week, and then it rains and it washes it all away. So the climate took out some of the really popular destinations because they're too warm, really, too hot, too tropical.
And that's why this wish list thing is so individualized. What's important to us may not be important to you or to whoever, but this was our wish list. So I went out trying to research this stuff, and I looked at Buenos Aires, which sounded good, but it's a big city, and I realized it was so far away. So just out of nowhere on Memorial Day of 2009, I discovered somehow Cuenca, Ecuador.
Didn't know how to pronounce it. Had no clue where it was.
We thought it was Cuenca. If you had put up a blank map of South America and said, if you can pinpoint where Ecuador is, I'll give you $1,000. You'd have kept $1,000. We had no idea. And yet, everything about it seemed almost too good to be true.
It did.
So I said, we got to go there. Time was not on our side, right? We didn't have the luxury of just taking our time and checking out this place in Mexico and that place here and this place there. We needed something to happen. So in July, 2 months later, we were here doing a 10-day scouting trip looking for red flags. Basically. This was the one that was
deal breakers. You're looking for deal breakers.
Exactly.
I said, all right, I'm going to go and look for all the reasons why we shouldn't do this. And you know what? When we showed up and we're walking around, I'm thinking, I can't find any. I can't find any reason why we shouldn't do this. So we got on the plane 10 days later and said, well, I guess we're moving to Cuenca, Ecuador.
All right, tell us about, I want to walk me through that first day or two. You're walking through, what is the town like? What are the people like? What are the restaurants like? What is life like there?
Well, that's different too from now and 14 years ago when we showed up.
Yeah. But then, you want to know then or you want to know now?
Then. What was it like then? Because then again, you drew probably, I don't know how many people to Cuenca, but what was it like when it was you and one other American blogger?
Well, that's the thing. When we showed up, I mean, Cuenca, just so you know, it's a UNESCO World Heritage
historical colonial city.
Downtown. But if I showed you outside of our window, we're in the modern part of town. Everything she just said, you're like, well, where's that colonial part? But it's 10 minutes in the other direction. Anyway, when we got here, we were, when they start a new high school and you're the first class that's going to be the graduating class.
Mm-hmm.
In 2010, we were kind of the first big part of the first big influx of expats to Cuenca. International Living magazine had been touting Cuenca as one of the top retirement destinations in the world. So when we showed up, nobody knows exactly, but maybe there were 500 expats out of a city of 500,000 at that time.
So Cuenca was around about 500,000 people when you first moved there. Okay.
But these expats many of them were former Peace Corps people that had maybe married a Cuencana and had kind of disappeared in the landscape. So I liken it in a overly dramatic way to people that got in a covered wagon and went out west during those days. We weren't taking arrows and stuff like that, but we had to start an expat community. We didn't know that at the time. There was no expat community.
Well, and I have to interrupt here. It was an exciting time.
Yeah, it's great.
The food was mostly typical food, but a lot of Ecuadorians had lived abroad and come back to Cuenca, and they knew how to make pizza, and they knew how to do Italian food. And so we could find those kind of restaurants. And there were a few upscale restaurants, but we found out later that a lot of Ecuadorians that lived here in Cuenca had sent their children abroad to study. They had gone abroad, a lot of them. And so it was more of an upscale community than we realized when we went at first glance. So we tried to find the food that we could enjoy. All of us made a lot of guacamole because avocados were abundant. So we did those things, but it was really, and this is only looking back that I can tell you this, it was so exciting to be part of that community building. Uh,
Mm.
it brought a lot of us together because we were really trying to figure out, well, how do you do this or where do you find this? And we were all into sharing that information. So that was kind of the beginning. Now it's totally different. The expat infrastructure is vast, and it's just not the same anymore. And the restaurants and availability of all types of international food. It's just wonderful. It keeps getting better and better.
Oh, so it keeps getting better. I thought you were going to say that the influx has kind of watered down how excited you guys are. Look, well, let me ask this. When you finally, I know you did your 10-day scouting trip. Then when you went back, were you still kind of 70-30 on whether you're going to stay, or did you guys really, were you kind of all in? You were kind of, were you, but when you went back to move there, and I want to ask you about the shock of the pricing. What was it? Tell me about what the prices were. But were you 70-30, or were you 99%, hey, we're doing this?
We were 100% were doing it. We said to
Oh,
each
there was no
other,
looking back. You were
no,
burn the
we
boats.
said,
Okay.
literally, we said to each other, Wes, we're doing this and we are going to make it work at the highest possible level, period. There is no what if. We're going for it. And it worked out. I mean, we came here hoping to survive, literally, and instead we've thrived. And part of it was mindset. If we believe, if you're not committed and you don't put the intent, uh, a, a dream, I say often, a dream without action is just a daydream. But
Mm.
we put intent to it, we put action to it, and we've made an incredible life here.
Well, tell me about the pricing back then. So what was it to rent a place or buy a place? How dramatic was the difference between the United States and Cuenca?
Well, it was and it is. That really hasn't changed that much. I mean, obviously, we have inflation, but not to the degree that it's occurred in the States. Back then, you could buy a place 75,000 maybe and up. Our first rental that we lived in for 11 years, we had a two-story penthouse apartment. The reason we rented instead of buying is why I'm going to tell you right now. We had a two-story penthouse apartment. Gosh, it was over 3,000 square feet, much bigger than we needed. But
Wow.
we made the mistake, Pollyanna, it'll work out. Our container that we shipped was on the way and we had no place.
Yeah.
So we were desperate to find a place to unload our furnishings when they actually arrived here. We were so silly to think it was going to be so simple. But anyway, that place was it started out $650 a month. So when you can have a 3,000 square foot penthouse apartment for $650 a month, we chose to go that route. And the savings that we had, rather than invest so much of it in the roof over our head, we thought we would look around for other potential investment opportunities because we knew nothing about any of that when we hit the ground. And it turns out there are those opportunities.
Taxis are, I mean, we marvel. A typical lunch will cost you $3.50. That includes, it's a full course lunch, a fresh juice, a soup, an entree, and a small dessert. And that's $3.50. That's our main meal of the day. So it was that, maybe $3 when we first moved here. It's gone up to $3.50 most places. And the taxi rides, I mean, they're still the same. We can go anywhere in the city for under $3 for a taxi ride.
So I'm thinking that if you start to try to do apples to apples,
It's about 25%.
An Uber ride in Atlanta can be $80. It
We
really
know.
could be.
We do that.
So I mean, if you're looking at it that way, 3 divided by 80, you're talking about it's like 95% cheaper in some ways.
For that,
a lunch in Atlanta is, let's call it $15. Easily could be $20.
Yeah.
So you're looking at, again, 80% cheap, 75%, 80% cheaper. Now, housing is still maybe not 90% cheaper, but it's still, call it 60 or 70% less expensive. How do you guys look at the average cost relative to the United States?
Well, when we go back to the States to visit our family, as soon as we walk in the grocery store,
We're shocked.
oh, holy cow. I mean, you spend $100 at Harris Teeter or Kroger or wherever, and you walk out with a bag in each hand, and we spend $100 here, and we have to have a taxi to take us home because we can't carry it all between the two of us.
Right.
So that's for starters. And what kind of apartment are you going to rent in Atlanta for $600-700 a month? You're
Yeah,
not.
you almost can't even do it.
You're
you
in
can't
a
even do
room
it.
somewhere, maybe.
Yeah.
So this is a term that we coined for those that have the courage or the boldness or the whatever.
Or either out of desperation.
Yeah, whatever,
Like we were.
whatever the motivation to give this moving abroad thing a shot, you hit what I call the retirement trifecta, because you get to, number one, lower your cost of living, number two, raise your standard of living, and number three, preserve or even grow your nest egg. Where is that possible? How is that possible?
Only in Cuenca. Would you say is it that unique that there, or would you, and you guys have become experts on this, and are there realistically, are there 3 other places in the world that people could do this? Are there 30 places in the world? What do you, just ballpark, how many places would you put on somewhat on par with what you're able to do at Cuenca?
Oh,
Well,
it has nothing to do with Cuenca, really.
The shocker is there are lots of places. And we spent until September, October of last year, the previous 2.5 years, we spent traveling full time to these popular expat destinations and a few others thrown in there to actually put boots on the ground in more places than just Cuenca, to make sure that what we're saying is authentic and real. You can research all day long on the internet, and a lot of places sound great, but you really, I think, need to personally experience those places to be able to talk about them with some authority. So, if you want us to throw some out there, we're happy to do that.
Yes, I want to throw them out. I want our listeners to be able to say to their family or their parents or whoever it might be, you call Cynthia and Ed and just go through a handful of places. And I know you guys you probably have some income because you're essentially guides now. And I'm sure you have a little bit, or at least some income, because you become experts on this. But yeah, give me a flavor of some other areas.
Yeah, and I want to tell you realistically, this is what people don't understand. That 2.5 years that Cynthia said that we spent, we just put all our stuff in storage here after COVID and left.
Right. It's not that we suddenly, had a windfall. We figured out that once we got there, we could cover our transportation to get into these places, and we stayed weeks, not just going like for a long weekend.
Yeah, well, we started with Mexico because Mexico never closed. So that was the beginning of our journey. And for 2.5 years, we did Mexico all around there. We went to Europe. We did different places in South America. And I mean, literally, Wes, if you lived in the suburbs, you can live in Paris on a Social Security budget. You're not going to walk out the door and say, "Oh, there's the Eiffel Tower."
We did that
because we did it. We stayed at an Airbnb in the suburbs. We took the train into the city inexpensively. You just have to. A lot of this thing I was talking about making your dreams come true, you've got to decide, what am I willing to give up to make that happen? Because if you can't have everything, what are you willing to not have to have at least most of it, the crux of your dream?
Yeah.
And in situations like a big city like Paris, that's how you do it. But guys, there's all kind of places in Mexico.
Well, yeah, it's like some of the top 5 places that we can wholeheartedly recommend. Of course, we have to give a shout out to Ecuador, our hometown, but
Sure.
well, our home country right now. But then Costa Rica, Panama, those two have been on the radar for quite some time. Probably prices have gone up a little bit, but they're still quite affordable and they have a lot going for them. And then Ecuador, and Mexico, number of places in Mexico. And I mean, I think, gosh, the places we visited, San Miguel de Allende, Lake Chapala. I mean, there are other places that have established expat communities that you could transplant to quite comfortably. And then Portugal, we loved Portugal when we were in Europe. That's been out there for a few years. And then I think Spain and France have risen to the top of great expat destinations.
So here's this combo. So first of all, right, if you're going to any of these places, and for some reason I always think of Portugal because I did, when I was in college, I did a study abroad, so I was in that southern Spain or near Portugal, and that's pretty. It's a magical part of the world, but maybe to your point, you're not living in downtown Sevilla or Seville or downtown Lisbon. You're maybe living out a little bit more in the suburbs, or maybe not. Even in some of the cool places. Now, you're not getting a water view, correct? That's not happening.
Well, I mean, that would be unusual, right? To have that, because you have to do the research, and you have to really understand your budget and what is it that you're looking for. What can you spend for a place?
And when you say so, let me go back to this. Let's do a baseline here. When you counsel people around this, for the most part, the places that let's call it your top 10, you can go there and live essentially just on Social Security.
Yeah.
Well, of course, that depends on how much your Social Security is.
Sure.
We combine our Social Security, but I'll have to tell you, in the beginning, we were spending most of it. Now we actually live on our Social Security, and we're able to save money, which in the United States, I mean, that would be unheard of, right?
Yeah.
So we can cover our monthly expenses. We've figured out how to use credit cards strategically to earn points and miles, and that will pay for a lot of the transportation outside of the country. And then, we have some left over to still invest. And it's really, I mean, if we were living in the States, we would be scraping by and living a very minimal lifestyle and spending every penny of it.
So maybe two things that it makes it seem like this equation becomes more realistic for people relative to when you did this, because again, you were like the first high school class in a brand new high school. Whereas today, if you go to one of these places, you pick your country, pick your town, pick your city, and you end up, you are much more likely to be able to be plugged in pretty quickly with the expat community. So that's my first question of what that's like today. And then of course, I want to know about healthcare. That, to me, that's the scarier part about all this. So let's start with that expat community. What is that? Why does that make it so great? And is that pretty accessible in a lot of these locations?
Yeah, well, there are two extremes of people that want to expatriate in that regard. Ones that want to duplicate as close as possible to their North American lifestyle. And on the other end, those that want to assimilate into the local culture and kiss everything about their former life goodbye. Then there's the big group in the middle. That bell curve is not equal. It would list toward the people that want some of the comforts they had in the
Yeah.
US or Canada, as opposed to just wanting to go native, so to speak.
Go native. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
within Mexico during our travels there, I will tell you that the expats that we found and met in Tulum seem to be more of
Off the
that
grid people.
off the grid people. They don't have a big community there. They don't get together for happy hours and all that. They do their own thing. They move there for that reason. You go to Lake Chapala, which is home to more North American expats than any place in the world. And you walk into a grocery store there and you feel like you're back in Kroger again. I mean, not the size of it,
But
not
you
the size of it,
but
but
you're
the
buying
availability.
you're buying products from Costco.
Yeah. Wow.
Well,
So it's just like you're in Marietta, Georgia.
pretty much.
There you go.
I mean, there is a Costco in the next city over from Lake Chapala. And we found out if you go in a grocery store there and say, can you get so and so? It's so close to the States that they order things and go weekly across the border into Texas and bring it back. So you got it all. And they got, like we do, they got community theater, they've got blah, 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 blah. So a place like that is just plug and play. You just show up. That's all you got to
Plug,
do.
plug and play,
There you go.
expat living.
That's
All
right.
So in a place like Cuenca, do they have, is it almost like, again, Little Italy in New York City 100 years ago? That's where everyone from Italy located. And it was this borough of mostly people that were from Italy. Are there little Americas in these towns?
I think that would depend on where you are in Cuenca. That's one of the things that was attractive to us. There are no gated communities where all the gringos live. People live all over the city, so it's the opportunity for just fitting in more to local life is greater when you have that. And in these gated communities, in some expat destinations, I think that you become more isolated. And those smaller towns within Ecuador have those communities, but that's not something that appealed to us. And so
it's really about that bell curve, Ed, what you're saying, the flavor, how much of the flavor of the country do you really want? As an example, an extreme, the folks in Tulum really wanted to feel like they're quote native, whereas if you wanted to, you can find very American subdivisions, if you will,
yes.
in XYZ country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys are kind of living maybe a little bit in between.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
it's funny about that. We've used the term gringo, and I want you to understand it's not gringo go home like the old days.
Right.
I think of that as a little bit like get out of here, gringo, right?
No, but
It's not like that.
That's what we're affectionately called here. There's no derogatory.
The gringos.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you that as a lead into the fact that the area of town where we live now is affectionately called Gringolandia. But
Take a left at Gringolandia.
But the reality is, in the building where we live, we told them we were moving into this building. It was like, oh, that's where all the gringos live. But we have a roster of all the people that live in this building, and we're maybe 10% of the population of even this building. So you go to a restaurant here, and we may be the only expats in it, but it's still called Gringolandia.
When you guys said you've got, let's call it, there were 500 folks in the early years. Today, are there 5,000? What's the number now?
Well, that is a number that's thrown around. You never know, Wes, for this reason. The immigration office always knows how many visas they issue. That's the easy part. They don't know how many of those people are still here. You can't count that part of it. So it's
I wanted to ask about that. What are the just that you don't have to be perfect here on this, but what are just kind of the general citizenship rules when you go to most of these countries? Are they fine to let you stay? Do you have to get nationality? Tell us about that part of this journey.
Sure, that's easy. You can stay in almost any country 90 days on your tourist on your passport. And in some cases, you can extend that for another 90 days. But beyond that, you've got to get a residency visa.
And that's different than becoming a citizen. So that would be the first step, is to become a permanent resident. And
How hard is that, though?
well, you know what? It's you got to jump through some hoops, do a lot of paperwork, and we recommend getting somebody to help you do all that. There are plenty of people, facilitators, attorneys that specialize in that sort of thing that can help you. It's not that expensive. And you want to make sure you get this right, because if you try to go down that road by yourself, even if you're bilingual, things change. And so you really want to streamline that whole process, and that requires getting somebody to help you. But usually, I'll let Ed jump in. There's a time period where you have to wait. You get temporary residency, and then you can convert it to permanent residency.
Yeah, that's changed since we got here. And you have to
So
stay.
now you guys, Ed, you guys have permanent residency, but you've not become citizens.
No, there's no incentive to. Well, there's an incentive to if you're a doomsday conspiracy theorist that thinks that the U.S. is going to go to where in a hat basket, and you need a safety valve with a second passport. We're not of that mindset. So for us, having a second passport really serves no purpose. So no, we haven't gone through the only big requirement would be that you have to know more Spanish than we do, to be perfectly honest.
Well, and there's a fee, of course, involved. But I will point out here, in case your listeners are interested in this, the U.S. is okay with you having dual citizenship. So you don't have to relinquish your U.S. citizenship, which we would never consider doing, I don't think.
Yeah.
To become a citizzen in many other places.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You do a bunch of paperwork and get things. You learn words like apostille.
It's like, who knows what that means?
Never heard of, but that's just a process where the state verifies that
your document is legit.
Puts a stamp on it that says it's legitimate. You got to get those kind of things. There are police reports so that you're not a criminal and so forth and so on. It's not that hard, but as Cynthia said, there are things in life that are DIY projects. And
this is not one of them.
This is not one. We've known people that brag about how they successfully got their own visa.
And
we know others that
good for you.
we know others that went down a black hole and never returned.
Right.
Is it? I still want to get to healthcare, but I still want to stay on these more fun topics. Tell me a little bit more about the expat community. Did you guys meet a group of people in those early years, and you still friends with them today? Are you continuing to meet new people? What do you guys go out every week to a cool native restaurant? It sounds so magical. Tell me about your friend. I want to know about your friends there, your social connections.
Yes. In the beginning, our one social event it's called a Gringo Night. It was at a bar and restaurant downtown, and you somehow found out about this just by talking to other people. Where can we go and get together with other expats? That was it. So we're all standing around, an adult beverage in our hand, talking about, okay, where do you get chili powder, and what attorney have you used, and where are you in the, I'm looking for an apartment. Do you know anybody? All of that happened, and we were religious about attending because we needed all those other people to help us.
Yeah, there was none
early
of that,
settlers.
There was none of that cocktail talk like in the States, like,
hey, what do you do?
So Wes, what do you do? It was like, here it was like, where can we find chili powder?
So anyway, it was fun in a way. And then Ed kind of spearheaded another Gringo Night because we realized quickly that once a week was not enough. And then people had parties. I mean, I collected everybody's email address. We want to know how to get in touch with you. Do you have a phone? How did you get that phone? And it was great. And then that was the exciting part. Now, fast forward 14 years later, it's like, I play bridge twice a week with my bridge club.
This is not her. This is just people.
Other people. Oh, it's like we have community theater. We have art groups. You want to go learn how to paint, or you want to write your memoir. We've got people that get together that do that. We've got fishing groups. We've got people that travel together. I mean, you name it, whatever you want to do, it's here. And like I told somebody once upon a time that was complaining about not having a singles group, I said, well, you know what? You're single. Why don't you start one? And a lot of us don't have much to do. And you know what he did? The first meeting, over 100 people showed up. It's crazy. So that's how
amazing.
You meet your friends. And today we still stay in touch with a handful of those people that we actually ended up liking. And it's great. We still get together for dinner. We go out, we go to each other's homes, and we make more than guacamole.
Yeah. I'll share with you, though, an interesting statistic for you and listeners. And this is not from us. This is just from studies. The average lifespan of an expat is somewhere between 3 and 4 years before they either go back home or move to a different expat place. They're like, this is great. We survived. Let's go try Lake Chapala for a while, or let's go to Lisbon.
We know people that have moved to Colombia. I mean, Medellin, Colombia is a beautiful city. And we lived there for a while.
So of that initial massive group of people there were so many that we had to divide them into an A, a B, and a C group because we couldn't even keep up with everybody. It was so many.
That's ridiculous.
But between people leaving and people dying, I hate to say it, but it's retirees.
Sure.
We run into people in the supermarket, the grocery store, and it's kind of like, oh, you're still here. And
yeah, you don't want to say,
oh, you're still here.
We don't want to say, oh, you're still alive. But we've lost track. So that's the polite thing to say. Oh my gosh, you're still here. We're so happy to have you.
What's kind of the average age of people when they make their first expat move?
Well, here's the funny thing. That's a great question.
I think it's changed.
It appeals to a broader thing than just retirees. COVID and all the remote work really accelerated this digital nomad lifestyle.
Yeah.
So now it was all just people at or near retirement age to start with. But now more and more young families or young people without children yet are doing the digital nomad thing. And with speaking to your retire sooner thing, we've told many people, we told our own kids, but they didn't listen to us.
Well, whatever.
Take your 6-figure income job that you're spending almost 6 figures to maintain the lifestyle, export that to a place like here where your budget's 2, maybe 3 if you want to live like a king, $1,000 a month, bank the rest of the money for as long as you want to do it. What a leg up you've got on your future retirement. And you had an adventure at the same time. What did I just say that was bad?
Yeah. I know. It's such a compelling case. All right, how about this? What if you're listening, you retire sooner, and you're saying, "Oh gosh, I've been great about saving, and I'm going to have $2 million in retirement, $100,000 a month in income." What does that look like? Is it still the same great towns? You live like an absolute king?
Well, that's the other part of it. Expats, we were in the desperate situation that we told you. But
sure,
all people that do this aren't economic refugees. There are also people that want to live large.
Yeah.
They've got some money. They did okay. I mean, maybe they're not wealthy, but they can take that money and be wealthy.
Yeah.
By moving to a different place.
And they don't have to worry about the idea, which, I mean, it's, if you know this, I'm sure, one of the biggest concerns about people approaching retirement or thinking about retirement is that they're going to run out of money. I mean, if you transplant yourself to a place where you don't have to worry about that brings so much peace of mind. And that's a big part of finding happiness in retirement, that you don't have to worry about the money.
Gosh, we need to quote that exact line. I think I've said that exact line. All right. What about, I want to ask maybe about kids and visiting, because that's not inexpensive, and grandkids, but let's go to healthcare. That's a question I get, and I don't ever have a great answer about this because I think it would be it's obviously going to be different almost everywhere you go. But in general, maybe start with Cuenca. Are you worried about? Tell us about the Medicare, because if you don't sign up for it, then you've got an issue if you're in the United States. So what's your general protocol around having Medicare in the United States and then using another health system and then being able to have it when you go back to the United States?
Yeah, Ed, why don't you talk about Medicare? We've written a lot about this, actually.
Basically, Wes, what you just said, we maintained our Medicare in the States for every reason. You never know.
Well,
we never knew we were going to be here, so we never know. You think you got the future plotted, but in life, when you're on that journey, you never know what's around the curve. It might be smooth sailing, it might be a truck on the wrong side of the road. So plus we go back frequently to see family, so it made sense for us to maintain the Medicare coverage. One thing I will mention, you read all the time, oh, Medicare doesn't extend beyond U.S. borders. For traditional Medicare, that's true. But many Advantage plans, which we have one of them, if you look at the fine print, there is coverage for emergency care outside the U.S. Ours is up to $50,000 a piece. So if something's wrong, you don't go to a doctor, you go to the emergency room at the hospital. You're probably going to have to pay for it and get reimbursed, but still, that's a workaround abroad. It's not true that there's no Medicare beyond U.S. borders with just blanket. It depends on your policy.
Right.
So we maintain the Medicare there. We also are part of the healthcare system here. We have 100% coverage, zero deductible, no restrictions for age or pre-existing conditions, and our premium between the two of us now is $90-something a month.
So I was going to ask, how do they pay for that? But again, you do pay for it. It's just not a lot. It's not a lot.
But $90+ isn't a whole lot for what I just told you.
But there are different levels of insurance here. That system is kind of like the Social Security system in the States. Health insurance is part of that system here, where people that are working pay into the system and then they are eligible for the health care. There's also in Ecuador a public health system. We've never used that because we are willing to pay and we can pay.
Would that be a little bit more like Would that be a little more like Medicaid here in the United States?
Yeah,
okay,
it's just for lower income people that they're the different economy, so to speak. Let's just put it that way.
And then the next level is private insurance, and that's available, interestingly, through individual hospitals, private insurance through companies that don't restrict where you can go to get your health care. And then there's out of pocket. And that's something that we always feel like we need to mention because we do sort of a hybrid here in Ecuador of out of pocket and belonging to the system. So Ed, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the issue with the system as it is in the States, kind of, you can't pick or a lot of places, you can't pick your doctors for things. So for specialty care like ophthalmology, dentistry, dermatologists, we want a relationship with those people. So we pay out of pocket for the periodic visits that we have to those people. And it's same day visit and it's $40 or $50. So it's no big deal money wise to.
How about the quality? How would you rate the quality of the healthcare there?
The quality of the healthcare worldwide that we've seen, and we've certainly not been everywhere, it's way better than you think, or that Americans think in general. Americans think they've got the inside track on everything, but it's better in a number of ways. One, a lot of the doctors are foreign trained, they're fluent English, there's modern equipment, but the best thing is the bureaucracy.
That's hard to say.
Oh,
you got it, Ed.
I feel like Scooby-Doo there for a minute. It's not there. It's not there. Like when we've had to use the healthcare system, Cynthia was in for a week one time with a problem.
Yes.
And when we left, I signed a clipboard and we walked out. That was the extent of the paperwork.
And from our primary care physician, I was told, and I suspected this was true, for my situation, I got world-class care. The protocol was exactly the same as
Wow.
anywhere in the world. And one of the things we really like about the healthcare, and we do think it's excellent, is it's more personal. And the
Hmm.
doctor will spend however long he needs to spend with you. He's not looking at the clock. And everybody else is just waiting patiently for their turn. Sometimes we get a little impatient, but it's okay. and the healthcare is conservative in terms of pharmaceuticals, in terms of the procedures that they're going to recommend, the test. And you have to understand that a lot of this, and we do in the U.S., is
CYA stuff.
CYA, and it's because the insurance companies dictate and control so much of what the doctors can and can't do and get paid for.
Let me ask you this. 14 years ago, this is a totally separate topic. So I feel like we've covered healthcare, and I love that. Let's go to the opposite in the frivolous end. We're going to ask about entertainment. So was the internet 14 years ago was still not great? I bet. That's my guess. What is it like today? And then does that mean, I guess, you just like being in Atlanta, you can watch YouTube TV and see what's going on in the US if you want to, or any other streaming service. Is that right?
And so can we.
When we moved here, we had dial-up that we paid about $30 a month for and shared with 7 other people.
It was busy at night.
At
Yeah.
night, when everybody got home from work and were on Facebook and everything, all you got was constant buffering. It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have fiber optic for the same price, and we can stream anything.
Yes.
And we do. So it's night and day difference with all of that. We spend it's cheaper. It's $25 a month
Yeah.
for our internet.
It is just as fast as the United States.
Well, it gets as fast as we want. We could have over 100 megabytes if we wanted, but it gets to a point where you're just bragging.
Yeah.
So interesting. I mean, there was a tipping point, and I wish I could remember the year, and probably with a little research I could, when you're walking around, and we had little candy bar phones when we first got here, and a phone plan. And then suddenly, a few years later, it wasn't very long, where suddenly everybody had an iPhone. Everybody. I'm not talking about gringos, expats. I'm talking about everybody in this city had one. And the little indigenous woman selling her fruits and vegetables on the sidewalk, she pulls out her iPhone, and I tell Ed, she's got a better phone than we do. How did that happen?
It's probably yeah. Well, the iPhone I think came out in 2007, so probably by 2009 or 10, everyone in Cuenca had one.
Yeah, but our
crazy.
Our cell phone plan's $8 a month.
I feel like mine's like $8 a day. Tell me about the kids. How often do you see your kids, and how do expats deal with leaving their friends, their family, their network back in the United States?
That's tough. And I think that, when people talk about how courageous we must have been, they're really thinking about how they would do something like that. And honestly, expat life is not cut out for everybody. If you are on purpose, and we have good friends in the States, in Atlanta, as a matter of fact, they want to be close to their kids, to their grandkids. They have them over for dinner all the time. They just could never do anything like this. And that is something that you have to ask yourself if you're considering this life. You can make friends anywhere, let's face it. And but your family, now those issues really tug at a lot of people. But I tell you what, it was our mission. All of our exotic travel was postponed for about 10 years so that we could go back to New Jersey and North Carolina to watch our grandkids grow up. And so we were willing, again, to give up that for ourselves so that our grandkids would really know who we were, and just FaceTime, Skype, WhatsApp. You can video I mean, there were many times where I would be chatting with my young granddaughters in the late afternoon so that my daughter could cook dinner. So I was literally babysitting online with my grandchildren. And it's because I made the time to do that.
How many times a year do you go back to the States?
Probably about three it ends up, but we stay weeks at a time.
Wow. So you really have a nice balance. It does. Listen, I know that it's not all Skittles and Kit Kats, and it's life. So life's kind of tough anywhere you go, but it is you guys have done this now for so long that it sounds like you're wise. You're wise to a pretty complex move that for anybody to do. It financially seems like it has worked out dramatically to the good. You've been able to balance the family, which I think is, in my mind, is the toughest part. The scariest part is kind of the healthcare piece. It sounds like that's pretty darn good in a lot of these countries, particularly where you guys are in Ecuador. And then the adventure part of it which is kind of what wraps this whole thing up in this kind of adventure, magical wrapping that I've always thought of this. I still, in my mind, I don't know if this is something I would ever do, but I think about it because I think I love the adventure. I was abroad for a semester, and I think back to those days in Spain. It was amazing. It was awesome. At my stage of life, I look around the United States and I think there's so many places in the U.S. I haven't spent enough time in. So, but I totally see this for you guys, and I think a lot of people. And the reality is that Americans are not overly prepared. Well, that's an understatement for retirement. It's hard to get there, right? It's hard. You hear Susie Orman say you need at least $5 million to retire. But what's the percentage of Americans that have that by the time they're 65? Probably 99.5% are not even close.
Right.
So the solving this financially and the way you guys have done that is something that I really have a lot of respect for how you guys have done this. And tell as we wrap and close up today, what do you guys do and how do you do it for people that are thinking about this? Do you just tell people to go to the website, download some of your material? Do you get on the phone with people? What levels of help do you give?
Well, we have kind of both of those. We have a program, well, two programs, the introductory package, which is the first two modules of the 5-module program, just for people that are just want to touch their toe and think about it without having to make a big financial commitment. Not that the whole program is that big of a financial commitment. And then we got the 5-module program to take you from getting a passport if you don't have one, all the way through to getting off the plane and wherever you end up going. And we also offer for people that have specialized needs consulting services that the price of that, of course, is based on the amount of time and energy we need to put into helping them solve whatever it is they need solving, whether it be travel, because we kind of become experts on that by default, so to speak,
Yeah.
or the whole expat thing in general, as
Well,
far as whatever they need.
yeah, I will have to add, our program includes our ongoing support. So, what you might need at the beginning of your expat journey is not what you need maybe midway through or even if you've been an expat for a long time. And also our website and all the articles that we've written in the blogs, we provide a lot of information for free. It's just our program sort of consolidates everything all in one place.
And that's edandcynthia.com, and Ed has 2 Ds, right?
Indeed, I do.
All right. As we part, give me your one quick favorite thing about expat living. Ed, you first.
For me, it is the stress-free life that comes with financial freedom. We went from a situation where we didn't know what we were going to do to a point where instead of a lifestyle in the States on Social Security income where we would always be thinking about what we're not getting to do, we live an upscale lifestyle and do whatever we want to do within reason. So the peace that brings you, it's almost indescribable. And so few
Cynthia.
people know it.
Well,
By the
yeah.
way, that was so good. That was amazing. Cynthia.
Well, I have to concur, of course, with what Ed says. But one of my favorite parts about our expat life is our pedestrian lifestyle, and we didn't touch on that at all. But living in the United States, outside of a few big cities where there is good public transportation, you have to have a car. And you have to drive most every place you go. And here we walk out our door and within 10, 15 minutes, our whole life is right here. And that is a game changer. Not only are you getting physical activity and exercise just by going to the store or walking to the gym or the yoga studio, I'm saying things that we do, or just walking by the river. It changes everything, your whole perspective.
That is like a Blue Zone ending. It's a Blue Zone beginning. Is what it is. Guys, we're gonna wrap. Thank you. This is so much fun. This was like so. I feel so warm and
fuzzy.
sunshiny after.
And I'd share with you that when we do something like this, we get excited all over again.
Yeah.
We've been doing this a long time, but it's like, this is a pretty good decision we made. We do have a really good life.
First day of high school, you guys are back. So cool.